Our next chapter is on homeostasis. Now, really, the entire body and a lot of living biology, a lot of biology in general, could be put into the category of homeostasis, because all homeostasis means is establishing consistency or constancy within an organism. Obviously, in order to survive, an organism needs to be able to make sure that things stay pretty constant. If something outside makes the organism hot, the organism has to figure out a way to cool itself down. If something outside makes it cold, the organism has to figure out a way to warm itself up. If something outside makes the level in a person's bloodstream, for example, too acidic, well, then the body has to figure out a way to counteract that. Making sure that you counteract whatever external forces try to wreak havoc in your body or in the organism is the concept of homeostasis. Stasis, you may recognize, means consistency, or static is another word, making sure that things stay the same. So homeostasis in general means the idea, so homeostasis is the ability of an organism to maintain its internal environment that in a manner that allows optimal cell functioning. In other words, in a manner that allows it to function as it's supposed to. That's generally what homeostasis means. How is homeostasis achieved? The answer is through feedback mechanisms. Feedback mechanisms are things within the cell or within the body that produce reactions that either counteract a negative outside influence or stimulate a positive influence. Positive feedback means something causes an increase in something else. Negative feedback, on the other hand, is when the body tries to counteract something. We'll see examples in a little while, but this is one quick example of negative feedback. When the body temperature rises, therefore it produces sweat, and that causes the body temperature to drop. Negative feedback is, of course, a very important mechanism in homeostasis. So when blood oxygen levels are low, you try to breathe in more oxygen automatically. Like one example we discussed earlier in the course, that when a person's running and needs more oxygen for respiration, there's now a deficit of oxygen in the bloodstream because it's being used up by the cells. And so the body says, okay, get us more oxygen, and you breathe in much harder. It also causes responses that counteract the change in order to bring back the system to the original condition. A classic example there is when the body tries to fight off bacteria, tries to fight off viruses. It's using white blood cells, using antibodies, using things to try to fight off the infection. Positive feedback, whereas it's common in other scenarios, it's not that common when it comes to the body systems. However, one example is that in childbirth, early contractions causes stretching, and that continues until the baby is born. And positive feedback in general is a change that produces a response that just increases the change. Here are some quick examples that occur in animals. Of course, in humans, we're going to discuss it in the next chapter. We're going to discuss it in the context of the endocrine system and the nervous system, which really maintain homeostasis in human beings. But let's quickly take a look at it in terms of the animal system. Birds and mammals are very good at maintaining homeostasis for all the internal conditions. I mean, really, every organism has to maintain homeostasis in one direction or another, but birds and mammals specifically have, they're warm-blooded, which is a very big difference from other types of animals, and therefore they need to be able to maintain a warm internal condition and have developed very complex mechanisms for maintaining homeostasis. Humans, of course, are examples of mammals. Some examples, the rest of the slide is really based on temperatures, because these ectotherms are cold-blooded animals that don't maintain a constant warm temperature inside. Examples like reptiles, amphibians, fish, invertebrates, which means animals without a backbone. And these things don't necessarily rely on internal mechanisms to keep their temperature constant because their temperatures vary, and for them it's no big deal. On the other hand, mammals and birds, which are sometimes known as warm-blooded animals, are also called endotherms. They produce heat by their metabolic reactions inside in order to keep their blood temperature warm. 98.6 degrees is the optimal temperature for a human being, so of course our body does whatever it needs to do to make sure that even on a cold day, our body is able to maintain a temperature of approximately 98.6 degrees. Now let's take a look at a couple of quick multiple choice questions over here. When a woman is in labor, early contractions cause stretching, which continue until the baby is born. That is an example. Well, we just talked about that a couple of minutes ago. That's an example of a positive feedback loop. Something that is the early stage of labor causes something that helps the labor to continue, that helps the labor to increase. Second question, in humans, the body needs to maintain oxygen levels within narrow homeostatic ranges. If the oxygen level drops, the body responds by doing what? Well, let's see. Using negative feedback to return the oxygen level to normal? Well, that looks about right. Using positive feedback to raise the oxygen level, positive, remember, is when you increase the distinction, you increase the disparity, you increase the change. Here you're decreasing the change, you're going back to normal. Using negative feedback to loops to lower the oxygen level, well, if the oxygen level is already too low, then you wouldn't want to lower it further. Using positive feedback to further lower, again, that doesn't make sense for the same reason. And setting the lower oxygen level as the new normal, body can't just do that. The body has to keep the same kind of normal as it always did. There are a couple of slides that I'm going to go back to now that I actually missed in the recording earlier. Here are another couple of examples of feedback mechanisms. After eating a large meal of pizza and salad, the blood sugar level rises. In response, the pancreas secretes a hormone called insulin, which acts to lower the blood sugar level back to normal. People that don't have an appropriate level of insulin or can't produce the insulin necessary are sometimes known as diabetics. Diabetes means an inability to control blood sugar level. So once the blood sugar level then drops to a normal level, then you stop. The pancreas stops producing insulin because it is no longer necessary. A positive feedback mechanism, which in this case is a bad thing, of course, is that high blood pressure damages the kidneys and the arterioles, basically the veins and arteries, things like that, and that causes the release of molecules which further raise the blood pressure, which is, of course, a bad example, a negative example of positive feedback. This example is just a very basic just a couple of diagrams that really illustrate the same example, one example of negative feedback and one example of positive feedback over here.